The 1992 James Hardie 12-hour is proudly brought to you by James Hardie Industries, Caltex, Peugeot, Bridgestone and Nissan.
And welcome back to the James Hardie 12-hour race at Bathurst. Action aplenty still to come here this afternoon on Channel 10. Also, your chance to win yourself, well, a gorgeous little car. Here's how you do it.
Well, I once won a car like that, so I reckon it's worth entering. I came out tops in an entry of 80,000 people. But look at this car. You're not going to win this other than by parting with money. And a rather delicious motor car too, this turbo Saab. It had a silly little problem really early on. Would that be a fair comment on it, Ken Douglas? Because they had no problems in qualifying and practice.
Sometimes just before the race, everyone wants to pull everything apart and put everything back together again. And it's just possible that when one of the mechanics did put it back together, one of the brake lines was aligned just slightly differently. And unfortunately, on the first lap of the race, it started rubbing on the tyre. First lap pit stop, and I'll tell you what, they've done an excellent job to come back from dead last. Currently up to 5th place, 2 laps down on the leader.
It's a superb performance and really has proved itself to be a superb car. I don't think many people thought that this modest limousine, luxury limousine cruiser with walnut dashboard and CD player and all the leather trim and the electric adjustment on the seats and the air conditioning and all that sort of nonsense, all that sort of lovely luxury would really work this well. But of course it's all due to two people, Glenn Seaton, who's driven it so well, Colin Bond, who's also done so, and helped build the motor car. And here's the veteran driver, Colin Bond, and what he's been up to at the mountain. And indeed, he's won at the mountain way back in 1969, and at the moment he's only 4 tantalising places away from leading in this car number 8. Colin Bond, the man that built this car. Let's have a look at just some of the enormous number of achievements of Colin Bond, ace rally driver.
Colin Bond has been there, done that in motor racing, and this year he has a James Hardie 12-hour outright victory in his sights with a newcomer to Bathurst, the Saab, a car Colin has a lot of faith in.
It's going to be an interesting motor car. It's turbocharged, of course. I think last year, having a 2-litre car here, if it was a flat circuit, the car would have been fantastic. But the mountain you've got to climb up, you need something with a bit of power. And I think that that's going to be the key this year. The most powerful cars are going to be the ones that do well. Yeah, there are a couple of other cars which I think will be potentially faster than us, but at the end of the day, let's see where we are.
Last year, Colin won his class in the MR2 Toyota. So how does he compare driving in the 12-hour to driving a Group A Sierra?
It's a breeze, actually, compared to a Sierra. For argument's sake, a Sierra with 6-speed gearbox and a lot of horsepower wants the wheel spin all the time. You're busy just controlling the wheel spin, making sure the car, and it's going fast between each of the corners. These cars, you can sort of sit back, study the line, make sure you get out the corner nicely, look at the rev counter, wait for it, get to the next gear, and it's a lot more relaxed because you're actually doing slower lap times, obviously, and that makes it so much easier to drive.
Colin Bond has the car, the experience and the know-how to give the Saab every chance. But to him, there's another reason for winning, and that's the developmental spin-offs that such a race offers.
Well, I always believe that motorsport helps the motor car industry in the long term. What actually happens here a lot of the times is that things are actually in advance, you know, like we were running, you know, the tyres for these cars are on now. They are a road tyre, but they're much better road tyre than what you'd normally have on the cars. These developments go into things, and you say this car is very sophisticated with traction control and ABS brakes and you name it, it's got it electronically. I guess that we'll be able to prove that point during the race to see whether, in fact, having all this electronics is going to be an advantage.
And come with us now for a ride in the Saab with Colin Bond. Colin, how are things going?
Fantastic, Will.
The car's recovered superbly. What will happen between now and race end? Can you get it going any quicker? Can you pull up any more of those tantalising 4 placings in front of you?
Well, I don't know. We're actually driving this thing into a bit of a plan because we can drive it much faster, but if we do, then the front brakes are just not going to go the distance, so we need to go on petrol. So what we're trying to do now, we're just trying to make the brakes last the hour and a half that the petrol lasts, and everything's working fine. So I think we'll just stick to our plan and hope those cars in front you know, their plans start to go astray, maybe, Will.
When are you going to open that lovely-looking glass sunshine roof and sort of go for a real tour?
Well, I got a few hands here in a minute. It's actually, I must admit, it's quite a comfortable car to drive and very pleasant. And when you get to our age of life, it's a nice thing to drive for a 12-hour race, I can assure you.
It probably takes a bit to get you away from yachting, doesn't it?
Well, particularly on a nice long weekend, wouldn't it? It'd be lovely on the harbour, but still, the view's fine from the mountain. I can almost see Sydney when you're going across the top there. But, no, I just think that it's been a great race so far for us, except for the first lap when Glenn had to come in and we lost about a minute and a half because one of the brake lines was just rubbing on a wheel.
What sort of assessment did you do when you got the invitation to drive an unlikely-sounding vehicle like a Saab luxury car?
Well, it was a funny one, actually. Kenny Matthews at first rang me and said, look, I think you're running a Saab in this 12-hour race. Will you run with me? And I thought, oh, golly, I don't know, Ken. I'm not that keen sometimes, you know, just a new car and that. And then all of a sudden he said, look, the factory's fairly keen to do something. And I said, well, we'll talk about it. And then next minute they said, yeah, well, the factory are in and they want to do it. And we need another driver. And I thought, well, we couldn't go wrong with Glenn. I didn't think at that stage that Glenn had a drive, and he obviously didn't. It took a bit of persuading even to get Glenn to say yes to go to the Saab. And no, just because it's a new car, I think, and it's a new model, and nobody had seen it before. I think it's opened up a few eyes actually, because it's been going perfectly all day. It's easy to drive. All we're using third gear even out of the cutting because of the torque of the turbo. And we're just trying to squeeze the throttle on so we just don't get wheel spin and that anywhere, Will, and it's actually fantastic.
It's a superbly well-balanced car, isn't it? Much more so than front-wheel drive cars of a few years ago.
Well, it is, and it doesn't sort of torque steer or unload. The only time you seem to... Oh, here's another Saab. We better pass this one. Hang on. No, he's taking the bit of road I want, Will. Hang on. That's better. Third, use second that time just because he's in the road. But it's across the top of the mountain here, you can actually drive it flat because you turn the wheel and the car goes where you want it to go, basically.
You must be travelling very quickly because it's got a lot of power.
I can't take my eyes off the... Yes, I can. 150 kilometres an hour. Oops, there's a slow vehicle. Hang on. Oh, no, look, here's a Holden. It's got no back wheel.
That's a novel idea. He's trying to save weight.
I don't think the disc is going to be all that big by the time he gets back to the bottom.
We're going to have a look at a replay of that car losing its wheel, Colin. Number 41, Alf Grant, Jane Taylor, Peter Brearley. Through the cutting, it lost the wheel, so it's making some progress. Made its way to the top of the mountain.
Well, I guess that's the hardest part for it. It's all downhill from there on in. We've got one of these masses coming up behind us. God, they've got some zot when they get alongside you going up the mountain, I tell you.
Yeah, that's changed the face of the race a little bit. What's your top speed down the straight, Colin?
We're doing, about 225.
And do you just turn right here without lifting?
No, I'm actually braking, only because, and I'm going back to fourth, I let it run against the gearbox. Normally you can do straight down without it. We're trying to look after the brakes, and this is one area that the brakes get a really big serve. And it's the way we've been driving the car, and it's been working fine for us.
So you're pulling out of there in third. Do you pick up fourth again? Yes, here it comes.
Fourth gear.
And then you've got to work the brakes pretty hard again without really letting them cool.
This guy's in the road, isn't he?
He is a bit, isn't he? Give him a push.
Hang on.
And you've got a bloke who's about to fly past you, making a wedge on your left-hand side there, Colin. I think it's a quick car.
Yeah, probably Hansford or something, is it?
Well, it's Charlie O'Brien.
Charlie, he'll go down the inside. That's all right.
Colin, look after yourself. I hope you can bring that car along because it's a really interesting entry and a surprising one in the way that it's gone.
Just look at this, though, Will. I mean, that RX-7's got plenty of horsepower. I mean, it's not getting away all that much, but it's a very nice package. It's a light car and it gets around the corners a bit better than us, I think. That's the main thing.
All right, we'll catch up with you later, Colin Bond, in the Saab, car number 8, in 5th place in the James Hardy 12-hour 100...
On Thursday night, on the sports show on Channel 10, Colin Bond was our special guest, and I said, Colin, the Saab, you're driving a Saab. It's a Swedish car, it's safe, it's sensible, nice car. But aren't they just a little boring? Boring?
Well, it's anything but boring, I must admit. It's been going fantastic today. We had one hiccup right at the beginning of the start of the race. Glenn went out, and on the first lap he was in 5th spot and said, rating up over the radio and said, look, there's something clicking in the back and I'm going to come in just to make sure it's okay. Luckily it did, because the brake line was rubbing on the brake wheel, and that would have actually worn through. So we wasted a minute and a half, and we've been trying to get it back all day.
Yeah, I mean, that was about 5:33, I suppose. It was very early this morning, and a few people said, the Saab's in already. Yeah. And have a look at you. You sneak your way up there, and you're sitting 4th, and you've been up there for a long time.
Well, I guess we've gone to a plan all day, actually, and it's been running perfectly for us. Glenn and myself looked at it at the beginning. We said, if we can run around in something like a 48-second lap, we can really look after the brakes and make the brakes last between each of our pit stops for fuel. And that's what we've been able to do. And in doing that, I think it's just paid dividends towards the end of the day, because the car's been running strong all day. You know, we had no dramas at all with the car. It's just a matter of every an hour and a half, we're coming and putting fuel in and putting brakes on the front. The back brakes were just back on the whole race. We've changed them, I think, once, just to be on the safe side. But basically, the brakes would probably do 2 hours, but because it doesn't fit in with our fuel requirements, you know, we've just been changing with the fuel.
There's so many drivers here today. You say, have you ever driven one of these before? The car they're driving, they say, no. What involvement have you had with the Saab before?
Nothing at all. And it was quite surprising, actually. I mean, I think you knocked it on the head the other night. You sort of Saab racing, and it is an unusual car to race, because Saabs don't make them to race. It's a very nice road car, and I guess that the speed that the car's been going and the way we qualified the car, it was up with all the other cars, which were purpose-built race cars, and I think that's been fantastic, not only for Saab, but for the race as well.
Well, you said earlier when you were running 5th, you said some of these boys in front of us might drop out. Well, the Toyota Supra blew that wheel. It just drifted away into the distance, and you're sitting 4th. Well done.
Thanks very much.
A couple of hours to go too. Colin Bond there with the Saab.